I saw my own car being driven by a complete stranger in the supermarket parking lot and discovered that my mother had forged my signature and sold my car for $25,000 to pay off her boyfriend's debts, a professional con artist with a criminal record. I was leaving the supermarket on a suffocatingly hot January afternoon that transformed the asphalt into an almost liquid surface, when my car's digital thermometer showed an impressive 108 degrees Fahrenheit, and the establishment's powerful air conditioning had become just a pleasant and nostalgic memory that vanished abruptly the exact moment the automatic tempered glass doors closed behind me with a final mechanical whisper that seemed to symbolize the transition between artificial comfort and the brutal reality of Brazilian heat. I was struggling with increasing difficulty and progressive discomfort to carry 4 heavy grocery bags, those reusable canvas bags. Sturdy and environmentally friendly that Amanda and I had bought on a conscious impulse months ago, during a particularly intense phase of environmental concern that motivated us to make small personal contributions to preserving the planet our gestating child would soon inherit. Now filled with a careful selection of premium meat meticulously chosen at the butcher shop after 15 minutes of deliberation about cuts and quality. Marbled ribeye that promises to melt in your mouth, artisanal lamb sausages seasoned with special herbs, seasoned skirt steak with the butcher's secret seasonings, ice, cold imported beer that cost 3 times more than equivalent domestic brands, but represented our small weekly luxury justified by hard work and the expectation of sharing special moments with dear friends. Superior quality eucalyptus charcoal carefully selected to guarantee the perfect smoky flavor and characteristic aroma, our friends always enthusiastically praised during our legendary barbecues, and a sophisticated variety of gourmet appetizers that Amanda and I had meticulously selected during an entire hour of pleasant and collaborative shopping, planning each item with the detailed care and obsessive attention of those who could finally afford small culinary luxuries after months of rigorous savings and conscious sacrifices meant to prepare our modest but cozy home for the imminent arrival of our first child who would forever transform our family dynamic and existential priorities. Amanda's unexpected but desired pregnancy had functioned as a transformative catalyst that completely altered our previously carefree financial perspective, motivating us to implement drastic changes in our consumption habits, including cutting unnecessary expenses we previously considered necessary, canceling entertainment service subscriptions that absorb significant monthly resources, and mainly prioritizing essential strategic investments for the baby who would arrive in a few months bringing monumental paternal responsibilities that I anticipated with a complex and contradictory mixture of constructive anxiety about my ability to be a good father and expectant joy, about the opportunity to raise a human being who would reflect our shared values and love. We had spent the last weeks methodically transforming the old home office where I used to work on personal nighttime consulting projects into a cozy and functionally perfect nursery, painting walls with special neutral yellow paint because we wanted to keep the exciting surprise of the sex until the dramatic moment of birth. Carefully and patiently assembling the certified natural wood crib we bought at a store specializing in sustainable furniture after exhaustively researching options that combined quality, safety, and environmental responsibility, and installing with military precision the special fabric blackout curtains that would guarantee restful nights of sleep for our child and consequently for us during the first challenging months of adaptation to parenthood. The elaborately planned barbecue for that golden Saturday afternoon represented our first significant social celebration since discovering the pregnancy through that home test that instantly changed our lives, a precious and carefully orchestrated opportunity to gather our intimate and carefully selected circle of genuine friends to share our growing joy and receive well-intentioned advice, funny stories, and mainly the emotional support of experienced couples who had successfully navigated the unknown and sometimes turbulent waters of modern parenthood. The relentless and seemingly malevolent sun created visible heat waves that distorted visual reality, like a hallucinatory mirage, making the air dance hypnotically over the melted asphalt of the parking lot that had transformed into a sticky and almost liquid surface, threatening to melt the shoe soles of anyone brave enough to remain exposed for more than a few consecutive minutes, transforming the previously solid black surface into an aquatic mirage that danced hypnotically before my already irritated and watery eyes, from the excessive and brutal luminosity that seemed to have physical intensity capable of causing real pain, while the progressive and inexorable weight of the 4 full bags relentlessly cut the blood circulation in my fingers through the canvas handles apparently designed by some sadist, specializing in causing maximum discomfort during prolonged transport under adverse weather conditions. My navy blue premium cotton polo shirt, carefully chosen in the morning during a moment of optimism about the approaching day, to project a casual but respectable and socially appropriate image during routine weekly shopping, was now completely soaked with abundant sweat that descended in persistent and salty drops down my back, creating that sticky and deeply unpleasant sensation that intensified my physical discomfort and made me desperately long for the refreshing and saving relief of my metallic black sedan's powerful air conditioning, strategically parked in the partial shade of a leafy but insufficient tree at the far end of the packed parking lot, where I had managed to find a spot after 20 minutes of frustrating search. It was precisely at that specific moment of delicate psychological transition between the satisfied and conquered relief of successfully finishing the obligatory weekly shopping and the growing and pleasant expectation of receiving our dear friends for an afternoon of genuine relaxation and deserved celebration of the life we were building together, that my apparently stable and predictable world catastrophically collapsed before my eyes, still in the process of adapting to the brutal and relentless clarity of the summer sun that seemed to have enough energy to melt not just asphalt, but also fundamental certainties about the nature of family relationships. Through the faded green-painted protective fence that functionally separated the commercial parking lot from the busy street, where constant and noisy traffic created a cacophonic urban symphony of impatient accelerated engines, irritated horns echoing collective frustration, and tires singing against the overheated asphalt in an emotionally significant discord melody, I spotted with growing incredulity that quickly transformed into paralyzing shock my familiar sedan in metallic black. That same vehicle that symbolically represented years of hard work, conscious financial sacrifices, overtime on weekends, and mainly dreams of family stability, being driven with disconcerting and arrogant naturalness by a completely unknown man who operated my vehicle as if he had been the legitimate owner for decades. The unauthorized driver was apparently a man of approximately 50 years, demonstrating evident signs of excessive vanity, exhibiting pronounced and shiny baldness that reflected the intense sun as if it were carefully waxed and professionally polished every morning as part of some obsessive personal care ritual, expensive mirrored sunglasses that reflected sunlight in an almost aggressive way suggesting desperate attempt to project sophistication and financial success, and a light blue sleeved dress shirt obviously expensive but slightly wrinkled, suggesting unsuccessful attempt to maintain respectable professional appearance even under the scalding heat that defeated any effort at elegance. More disturbing and psychologically devastating than his physical appearance was the absolutely natural and proprietary manner with which he operated my personal vehicle, adjusting the center rearview mirror with intimate familiarity of someone who knows every detail of the car, manipulating the steering wheel with casual confidence of someone who believes they legitimately own that property for years, even humming apparently carefree to the sound of the radio that I instantly recognized as my favorite classic rock station tuned to the exact frequency I always left programmed. It was like observing through a dimensional window a stranger living a bizarre alternative version of my own life, using my personal belongings with the casual ease of someone who never questioned for a single second their moral and legal right to do so, creating a surreal sensation of watching my own existence being lived by an imposter. The psychological shock was so intense and devastating that I literally felt my knees buckle violently, as if someone had suddenly removed all the supporting bones from my legs, transforming them into inconsistent jelly. While my rational mind desperately tried to process that visual impossibility that completely defied my basic understanding of reality, and mainly my fundamental confidence in the natural order of things where personal properties remain safe when left under the care of trusted family members. The 4 heavy bags simultaneously slipped from my hands, numbed by emotional shock and sudden loss of motor control, spilling onto the overheated asphalt a disastrous cascade of carefully selected products that spread in a chaotic geography of destroyed culinary dreams. Cans of imported beer that rolled, producing discordant and depressing metallic sounds while spreading in random directions like soldiers in retreat. Premium meat packages that partially tore open, releasing rich aromas that immediately attracted opportunistic and insistent flies. Spices whose delicate packages shattered, spreading colorful and aromatic powders that created small perfumed clouds in the warm breeze like involuntary incense. And mainly the superior quality charcoal that broke into angular and pointed fragments that seemed to prophetically symbolize the sudden and irreversible fragmentation of my previously rock-solid domestic tranquility. Every penny meticulously invested in that car over 3 years represented conscious and often painful sacrifices that Amanda and I had made together during our journey of serious relationship committed to a shared future. deliberately giving up romantic vacations for 3 consecutive summers when our friends happily traveled to exotic European and Caribbean destinations we saw only through enviable and carefully edited photographs on social media that intensified our feeling of missing important experiences. Systematically canceling romantic dinners at expensive and atmospheric restaurants, replacing them with improvised homemade picnics in the municipal park, or experimental cooking nights in our small but functional kitchen, where we discovered hidden culinary talents and mainly domestic intimacy that no expensive restaurant could provide. Consistently postponing the purchase of new clothes even when our favorite pieces began showing inevitable and embarrassing signs of wear, from frequent use forcing us to develop creativity to extend the useful life of limited wardrobes. Religiously avoiding cinema and any paid entertainment, replacing them with movie nights at home, with homemade popcorn prepared with love and economical drinks. We discovered were equally satisfying when accompanied by the right person, all motivated by the unwavering and unbreakable determination to conquer solid and lasting financial independence that would allow us to face with tranquility and confidence the predictable and unpredictable economic challenges that inevitably accompany the birth of a first child in a society where adequately raising a child requires substantial resources and meticulous planning. Amanda, who had remained discreetly by my side, organizing her own smaller purchases in an artisanal cloth bag she herself had embroidered during quiet pregnancy nights, while I clumsily struggled with my disproportionate and obviously poorly distributed load, immediately perceived through feminine instincts, sharpened by pregnancy's hormonal sensitivity, that something catastrophic and potentially devastating had happened, even before following the direction of my desperate and progressively incredulous gaze, that remained fixed on a scene my mind refused to adequately process. Her primitive and powerful maternal instincts, exponentially intensified by pregnancy hormones that make women especially sensitive to environmental changes that might represent threats to family well-being, detected my instant and dramatic emotional alteration through microscopic but unequivocal signs that only women who genuinely and deeply love us can interpret with almost supernatural precision. The sudden change in my breathing that became irregular and shallow, as if my lungs had suddenly forgotten how to function properly. The muscle tension that visibly spread through my shoulders and neck like waves of negative energy, mainly the expression of growing shock and existential despair that settled on my face like a Greek tragedy theatrical mask that instantly transformed my physical appearance into a visual representation of internal emotional devastation. Her delicate hands, but strengthened by months of intense and physically demanding work as a nurse in a constantly crowded pediatric ward, with children requiring specialized care 24 hours a day, moved instinctively to protect the rounded belly where our child grew day after day, developing physical characteristics and unique personality. In a primitive and universal gesture that pregnant women automatically make when detecting any type of danger or potential threat to established family well-being. "Raphael, darling, what's happening? You've gone pale as if you've seen a ghost materialize before your eyes," she initially asked with a soft and melodious voice loaded with genuine maternal concern. Still not fully comprehending the devastating magnitude of the discovery that was about to shake the foundations of our emotional and financial stability, carefully built over years of joint work and meticulous planning. When she finally followed the precise direction of my fixed and increasingly incredulous gaze, identifying with progressive clarity the specific object of my horrified and paralyzed attention, her voice drastically changed tone in an emotional escalation that reflected her own transition from tranquil unknowing to terrible comprehension of the reality unfolding before us, rapidly escalating in concern and growing urgency. "Raphael, isn't that your car going down the street right now with all naturalness? But who the hell is that complete stranger driving as if he's been the legitimate owner for decades? Did you lend the car to someone in the family and forgot to tell me about the arrangement?" Her questions came in rapid and anxious bursts, reflecting her desperate and increasingly frantic attempt to find rational and socially acceptable explanations for a situation that completely defied our established understanding of everyday reality and mainly our basic confidence in the honesty of close people. Her crystalline blue eyes, normally serene as a mountain lake on a windless day and full of unshakable confidence in the promising future, we were building brick by brick through joint effort and shared love, now moved nervously like frightened birds between my progressively paler face reflecting growing shock and the familiar vehicle slowly moving away in the congested Saturday afternoon traffic, symbolically carrying away years of our carefully cultivated financial dreams and mainly our previously solid sense of security regarding the near future we had planned with such care and optimism. Amanda firmly held my available free hand with the surprising and comforting strength of someone determined to keep us emotionally united in the face of any adversity fate might present. While her other hand remained protectively positioned over her belly in an instinctive maternal attitude that had dramatically and visibly intensified since we discovered the pregnancy 2 months earlier through that home test that instantly changed our priorities and perspectives about responsibility and shared future. I grabbed my latest model smartphone with hands that trembled uncontrollably like delicate leaves in a strong storm wind, my fingers practically sliding uncontrollably over the touch. Sensitive screen, due to the cold and sticky sweat that had instantly spread across my palms in an automatic physiological reaction to the extreme stress my body was experiencing for the first time at that devastating intensity, and dialed Vera's memorized number with mechanical movements automated by the absolute emergency of the surreal situation, knowing intuitively through years of family experience that she was literally the only person besides Amanda who possessed a carefully kept spare key and complete emergency documentation of the vehicle stored in an organizer folder at home. Her number was permanently engraved in my muscle memory, since the turbulent teenage times when frequent calls home were necessary to coordinate family activities. Those familiar digits that symbolically represented decades of regular communication about work, romantic relationships, ambitious family plans, and all the apparently trivial but emotionally significant conversations that responsible adult children naturally maintain with mothers when preserving healthy relationships founded on genuine love, mutual respect earned through years of coexistence, and mainly family trust established through decades of consistent and predictable behavior. The phone rang exactly 6 long and anguishing times before she finally answered, each ring seeming like a psychological eternity of growing anxiety and terrible speculation that made my heart progressively accelerate while increasingly catastrophic and unlikely scenarios spontaneously formed in my agitated mind like a horror movie projected at high speed. When she finally answered after a pause that seemed to last hours, although it was only chronological seconds, her voice had that characteristically breathless and notably tense quality that I instantly recognized from historical moments when she was nervous about some specific situation, or deliberately trying to hide some important information that could cause family conflict if revealed prematurely. A specific and unmistakable vocal pattern that I had learned to identify and adequately interpret during decades of intimate family coexistence and careful observation of her communicative habits. "Hi, my dear son, is everything okay with you today? You sound a bit agitated by the tone of your voice. Did something specific and worrying happen today that I should know about?" She asked with clearly forced and artificial naturalness that contained evident and undeniable nuances of extreme nervousness that my ears, trained by years of regular phone conversations and unconscious analysis of familiar vocal patterns, easily detected even through the inevitable electronic distortion of the cell phone call via tower. There was something fundamentally different and disturbing in the natural rhythm of her characteristic speech, an almost imperceptible but definitely present hesitation between carefully chosen words that strongly suggested she was meticulously calculating each syllable before pronouncing it out loud, as if she were carefully following an elaborate mental script previously rehearsed for this specific conversation she had anticipated and psychologically prepared to inevitably face. "Mom, I urgently need a direct and completely honest answer right now, without beating around the bush or evasions. Where exactly is my car at this specific moment? Because I literally just saw with my own eyes someone I've never seen in my life driving it down the street with total naturalness, as if they've been the legitimate owner for years, and you're literally the only person besides Amanda who has access to the spare keys and complete legal documentation," I said with growing determination, keeping my voice firmly controlled despite the devastating emotional hurricane that was systematically destroying my interior, desperately trying to maintain sufficient psychological control to obtain clear and precise information, instead of entering complete and counterproductive panic that wouldn't solve absolutely anything about the practical situation unfolding before me. The embarrassing and deeply revealing silence that followed lasted exactly 15 time seconds that stretched like endless hours in my temporal perception distorted by stress, more than enough time to definitively confirm without a shadow of doubt all my darkest and most unwanted suspicions about what could possibly have happened to my personal vehicle during my confident absence. During that tense silence loaded with ominous meaning that seemed to electrify the air between us through the phone connection, I could clearly hear in the background of the call a television functioning at high volume tuned to some sports program with animated narrators. Male voices enthusiastically conversing about subjects I couldn't completely discern, but that seemed related to game results or player statistics. The characteristic and unmistakable noise of aluminum cans being repeatedly opened with those distinct metallic pops suggesting social consumption of alcoholic beverages in the middle of Saturday afternoon. And mainly Vera's heavy and visibly irregular breathing, revealing extreme levels of emotional stress and psychological anxiety that she desperately tried to disguise through breathing control techniques that clearly weren't working properly. Raphael, my dear son, I need to explain a very complicated and extremely delicate situation that has developed in recent weeks. Jorge is facing a terrible and desperate financial crisis because the retirement benefits promised by the government have been delayed 3 complete months due to inexplicable and apparently deliberate bureaucratic problems at Social Security. And yesterday afternoon, 2 intimidating men appeared at our house door collecting old debts with very serious and explicit threats of physical violence that completely terrorized us. She began gradually, trying to carefully establish an elaborate and emotively charged narrative of dramatic victimization that would previously justify any drastic and possibly illegal action she might have taken during the last weeks without my knowledge or consent. Her voice trembled perceptibly like a leaf in the wind while she methodically built her carefully rehearsed justification, each word being strategically chosen to awaken my natural sympathy and filial understanding instead of my growing and justified indignation. It was obvious to any attentive observer that she had rehearsed this elaborate explanation several times mentally, preparing psychologically and emotionally for the inevitable moment when I would discover whatever she had done with my car during my confident absence, building an emotional defense that attempted to transform possible crime into a maternal gesture of desperate protection. Vera, stop immediately with these dramatic and manipulative detours and answer my specific question directly. Where exactly is my car at this precise moment? I insisted with growing firmness and authority that surprised even myself, purposefully using her proper name instead of the maternal term, Mom, to establish a more formal and less emotional communicative dynamic that could efficiently cut through her obvious attempts at emotional manipulation through calculated and strategic maternal appeals. Son, we urgently needed exactly $25,000 to prevent Jorge from facing serious and potentially irreversible physical consequences that could result in hospitalization or worse. Since your car was apparently parked for several weeks in the garage because you were exclusively using the company's for your daily professional activities, I genuinely thought you wouldn't immediately miss it, and that we could quickly resolve the entire financial situation through negotiation with creditors before you noticed anything or were negatively affected. She gradually confessed, revealing carefully selected fragments of the devastating truth little by little as if this partial revelation strategy made the potential crimes morally or legally less serious. Her partial and calculated confession hit me with the devastating force of a direct punch to the unprotected stomach, leaving me momentarily breathless and with slightly blurred vision while my mind slowly processed the complete and terrifying implications of what she was admitting with shocking naturalness. She had sold my personal car without any explicit legal authorization for only $25,000, a vehicle in excellent mechanical and aesthetic condition that was easily worth $40,000 in the current market based on research I had recently done for insurance purposes, representing a catastrophic and inexplicable financial loss of $15,000 beyond the fundamental and irreversible violation of family trust established during decades of apparently stable relationship. Worse still, she was completely wrong about my current transportation situation. I wasn't using the company car by personal preference or convenience, but because my own vehicle had been for exactly 17 days at the specialized mechanic shop, patiently waiting for the arrival of specific imported replacement parts necessary for complex automatic transmission repair that would cost approximately $4,000, but was essential to keep the vehicle functioning properly. You sold my personal car, which I worked intensively for 3 entire years doing overtime sacrificing weekends and holidays, for only $25,000 to pay off Jorge's personal and private debts? A car in impeccable condition worth at least $40,000 in the current market according to recent professional appraisals? I asked with growing indignation that made my voice involuntarily rise in tone and volume, attracting curious and worried looks from other customers leaving the supermarket loaded with their own weekend purchases, completely oblivious to the family drama unfolding a few yards away. Raphael? It was complete desperation motivated by genuine love and real concern. Jorge was justifiably and really afraid of suffering serious physical violence that could result in permanent injuries or worse, and I simply couldn't watch passively when I had a concrete way to temporarily help him using an asset you weren't actively using at the moment," she responded persistently, desperately trying to transform family theft and betrayal of trust into a romantic gesture of well-intentioned maternal sacrifice that any understanding son should accept with gratitude instead of indignation. Amanda firmly held my available free hand when she perceived with her sharpened instincts that my breathing was becoming dangerously irregular and shallow due to the emotional shock combined with the scalding heat that made it progressively difficult to maintain the mental clarity necessary to make rational and strategic decisions in moments of unprecedented family crisis. "Raphael, darling, our child growing inside me needs daddy to maintain emotional calm, to be able to think with maximum clarity and make intelligent decisions instead of reacting on emotional impulse that could harm our family," she whispered with early but convincing maternal firmness, placing her hands protectively over the rounded belly, in a gesture that constantly reminded me of our future responsibilities as responsible parents, and mainly of the urgent need to resolve this devastating situation in a mature and effective way, instead of allowing destructive emotions to control our actions. Her stabilizing and physically comforting presence, combined with her sensible and psychologically balanced advice, helped me recover sufficient emotional composure to continue the difficult conversation with Vera in a productive and objective manner, instead of exploding in justified but counterproductive fury that wouldn't solve absolutely anything about the practical situation we faced. Amanda possessed that rare and valuable ability to maintain crystalline rationality in moments of extreme emotional crisis, a direct result of years working professionally as a nurse in medical emergency situations, where quick and precise decisions frequently mean the literal difference between life and death for vulnerable patients who completely depend on competent professionals. "Vera, I'm going to hang up this phone now because I need personal time to think carefully and strategically about the specific legal actions I'm going to take to resolve this criminal situation and recover my vehicle through appropriate channels," I declared with a controlled but firmly determined voice, establishing clear communicative limits in the conversation before she could continue with additional attempts at emotional manipulation that could confuse my mental clarity about the fundamentally criminal nature of the actions she had consciously taken. "From this historic moment on, you are officially criminals who committed qualified embezzlement, and I will seek all available legal means in the judicial system to recover my vehicle and hold you properly accountable for the substantial financial and emotional damages caused through your deliberate actions." I decisively hung up the phone before she could respond with additional justifications or manipulative emotional appeals. Knowing intuitively through family experience that prolonging that toxic conversation would only expose me to additional psychological manipulations that could dangerously confuse my mental clarity about the unequivocally criminal nature of the actions she had consciously taken against me and my forming nuclear family. Felipe, my best friend since the nostalgic days of engineering school, where we met in a particularly difficult differential calculus class, and now minority but influential partner in the specialized consulting office where we worked, developing complex industrial automation projects for multinational companies, appeared in the overheated parking lot exactly 15 minutes after the devastating call, as if some supernatural masculine instinct alerted him that I urgently needed solid emotional support and practical assistance during an unprecedented personal crisis in our long and tested friendship. He was riding his characteristic red Honda motorcycle that we immediately recognized by the distinctive sound of the modified engine with sports exhaust, parking carefully near the spot where Amanda and I remained standing like shocked statues, trying to emotionally process the complete magnitude of the family betrayal we had just discovered so brutally and unexpectedly. "Dude, I came here specifically to get that impact drill you lent me last week for my home woodworking project. But from the somber look of you two, it seems like some serious family tragedy happened," he observed with sharp perspicacity and natural emotional intelligence, removing his protective helmet and revealing hair disheveled from prolonged use of safety equipment. Felipe possessed that natural and developed emotional intelligence that allowed him to instantly identify when his friends faced serious problems through body language and facial expressions, plus an unshakable loyalty that automatically motivated him to offer practical help without asking unnecessary questions about intimate details that could be embarrassing or painful to share. We told Felipe the entire surreal situation in detail, from the initial and shocking visual discovery of the car being driven by a stranger to Vera's partial and manipulative phone confession about the unauthorized sale of the vehicle to pay off her criminal boyfriend's debts. He listened with growing attention and increasingly serious facial expression, asking specific and intelligent questions about precise chronology of events, and mainly about the complex legal aspects of the situation that could be relevant to determine our available legal options in the Brazilian judicial system. Dude, what your mother did isn't a minor family matter or communicative misunderstanding about a loan. It's a serious federal crime with a specific and well-defined name in the Brazilian Penal Code, Felipe declared with impressive professional seriousness, demonstrating substantial legal knowledge he had acquired during years managing complex contracts and legal issues at our business consulting office. Qualified embezzlement, falsification of official documents if she forged your signature on papers, qualified fraud if she impersonated you during transactions. And the fact that it was premeditated for weeks means consciously planned crime, not an impulsive decision made under momentary emotional pressure that could generate mitigating circumstances. Felipe immediately offered to help us in a practical and concrete way, starting by offering to personally accompany us to the police station specializing in property crimes that operated 24 hours for official registration of occurrences related to thefts, robberies, and financial fraud of all types. You won't face this situation alone while I'm alive and able to help, he declared with characteristic loyalty that warmed my heart even amid emotional devastation, immediately calling Dr. Henrique, that renowned criminal lawyer who had helped other important clients from our office in complex legal situations, to schedule an urgent legal consultation that same afternoon to discuss specific legal strategies available in our particular case. At the police station specializing in property crimes, located in an austere and intimidating government building downtown with that typical 70s bureaucratic architecture that prioritized practical functionality over any aesthetic consideration or citizen comfort, Detective Martins received me in a small and functionally Spartan room, decorated only with basic institutional furniture of worn metal and wood, yellowed informational posters about citizens' rights tacked to peeling walls, and mainly an atmosphere of professional seriousness that immediately reassured me about the authorities' competence. He was a visibly experienced man of 45, lived years who had clearly dealt with thousands of similar criminal cases during 2 decades of dedicated police career, demonstrating through precise technical questions and legally well-founded comments that he perfectly understood all the complex legal aspects of the criminal situation I was reporting with growing indignation and despair. Mr. Raphael, from the specific facts you're reporting, clearly and in detail we have configured here qualified embezzlement through specific abuse of established family trust, potential falsification of official documents, if there was deliberate signature imitation, and possibly consummated fraud depending on exactly how the sale transaction was consummated and documented, he explained methodically, taking detailed and precise notes on an old desktop computer that functioned with frustrating slowness, but apparently met basic official documentation needs. The fact that the perpetrator is your biological mother doesn't diminish at all the criminal gravity of the committed acts. In fact, it can legally aggravate the situation by demonstrating specific abuse of family trust established over decades of apparently stable and mutually respectful relationship. The meticulous and bureaucratically necessary process of officially registering the police report lasted exactly 2 intensive and mentally exhausting hours, during which I provided extremely detailed information about precise chronology of events as I understood them, specific nature of family relationships involved including history of trust established over decades, complete technical characteristics of the vehicle including memorized chassis number, legal ownership documentation, plus my detailed and emotionally charged version of the facts as I understood them based on limited but convincing evidence available until that traumatic moment. Dr. Henrique, the specialized criminal lawyer enthusiastically recommended by Felipe based on successful previous professional experiences, proved to be a competent and impressively experienced professional, specifically specialized in cases of family property crimes, a legal specialization unfortunately necessary in modern society due to the growing and alarming frequency of this type of situation that was becoming a silent social epidemic. He cordially received us in his elegant and professionally decorated office, located in a noble commercial zone of the city, decorated with impressive diplomas from respected universities, shelves filled with updated legal codes and legal doctrine books, and mainly a legal library that visually demonstrated decades of specialized study in criminal law specifically applied to complex and psychologically challenging family contexts. Your situation is legally clear and technically simple to prove in competent court. You are unequivocally a victim of serious crimes committed by people who deliberately abused your family trust for personal profit purposes. Dr. Henrique declared, after carefully reviewing all the documents we brought and attentively listening to my complete and emotionally charged account of traumatic events. The fact that your mother possessed keys for legitimate family security reasons didn't grant her any legal right to dispose of the vehicle without express and documented authorization, much less to sell it to third parties with the specific purpose of paying off personal debts unrelated to the legitimate owner. During the 2 tense and emotionally draining months between the official complaint formally registered at the police station and the subsequent temporary arrest of Vera and Jorge for detailed investigation of the reported crimes, I faced intense and relentlessly constant psychological pressure from various well-intentioned but completely misinformed distant relatives about the real facts, desperately trying to convince me to withdraw the legitimate criminal charges and resolve the situation in family through emotional conversation and Christian forgiveness instead of through the formal judicial system that exists specifically to protect crime victims. Distant uncles I hadn't personally seen in years regularly called with elaborate and emotionally manipulative arguments about unconditional Christian forgiveness, sacred family unity that should supersede legal considerations, and mainly about how I would feel psychologically guilty for the rest of my life for sending my own mother to jail, even though she had committed serious and documented crimes against me and my forming nuclear family. Raphael, you need to think very carefully about this before making definitive decisions. Your mother may have made a big mistake this specific time, but she's still your biological mother who raised you alone after your irresponsible father abandoned you both, and family is sacred regardless of temporary problems that might arise. My Aunt Conceição insisted repeatedly during long and emotionally draining nighttime calls that extended for hours, trying to awaken religious guilt and traditional filial responsibilities that supposedly should automatically supersede practical considerations about legal justice and personal protection. Will you be able to live in peace knowing you were directly responsible for putting your own mother in prison? Think about what extended family people will say during family reunions. Think about the example you'll teach your arriving child about forgiveness and family loyalty. Amanda was my most important and emotionally stable ally during this period of intense family pressure that threatened my determination to seek legal justice. These well-intentioned people trying to convince you to give up your legal rights won't concretely help pay the debts that were fraudulently created in your name, won't assume legal responsibility for the crimes committed against you, and mainly won't protect our nuclear family from future violations if you publicly demonstrate that crimes against you are perfectly acceptable when committed by close relatives who claim to love you. She observed with practical wisdom and psychological perspicacity, acquired through years working in a hospital environment where she had witnessed countless dysfunctional families that systematically prioritized social appearances over the real well-being of the most vulnerable members needing protection. Felipe also offered crucial perspective and unwavering moral support during long and reflective conversations we regularly had at the office after particularly stressful workdays. If you give in now to emotional family pressures, you're sending a clear and unequivocal message that crimes against you are perfectly acceptable if committed by relatives who claim to love you. This isn't genuine Christian forgiveness. It's an explicit invitation for future, even more serious violations that could also affect Amanda and your child. He argued with relentless and crystalline logic that efficiently cut through all the elaborate emotional justifications our well-intentioned but misguided relatives systematically built to defend clearly criminal behaviors disguised as family love. The trial was scheduled for a cold and gray September morning that seemed appropriately melancholic, exactly 4 months after the initial traumatic discovery in the supermarket parking lot, a date that had become a definitive temporal dividing mark in my personal life between previous naivety about family relationships and the painful but necessary subsequent wisdom about the true nature of human relationships when tested by extreme financial pressures and temptations of easy profit. Seeing Vera sitting silently in the defendant's bench was an emotionally devastating experience that made me fundamentally question everything I thought I knew about true motherhood, genuine family loyalty, and mainly about the apparently unlimited capacity of human nature to rationalize clearly unethical behaviors when motivated by destructive passions or desperate financial needs that nullify basic moral considerations. She had visibly aged several years during the few months of the stressful legal process. Her previously well-maintained hair regularly treated at a professional salon now disheveled and without the regular aesthetic treatments she had religiously maintained for decades as part of her feminine identity, her face showing deeper and more expressive wrinkles that seemed to have literally formed overnight under extreme psychological pressure, and mainly her eyes carefully and deliberately avoided any direct eye contact with me, demonstrating a complex mixture of genuine shame combined with growing resentment for facing real and tangible legal consequences for the criminal choices she had consciously and deliberately made during weeks of careful planning. The competent public prosecutor, Dr. Carlos Montenegro, presented solid and legally irrefutable evidence during 2 hours of meticulous and technically impeccable exposition. Detailed graphological analyses of the forged signatures that proved deliberate and systematic imitation through modern scientific techniques, sworn testimonies from notary officials who confirmed irregular procedures during the illegal property transfer, complete bank records that meticulously documented the illegal financial flow from the sale to the final destination of resources, and mainly high-quality security recordings obtained from cameras strategically installed in the notary office that visually documented the crimes being committed in real time with clarity that didn't allow questioning about the perpetrator's identity. Your Honor, the physical and documentary evidence unequivocally demonstrates that the defendants consciously participated in an elaborate and systematic criminal scheme that resulted in embezzlement of another's property through deliberate document falsification and improper use of identity with the specific purpose of obtaining illicit financial advantage. Dr. Montenegro declared with impressive professional authority that echoed through the completely silent courtroom, where only the sound of tense breathing broke the solemn atmosphere charged with judicial expectation and palpable emotional tension. During her emotional personal testimony, Vera desperately tried to minimize her legal culpability by presenting herself as an innocent victim of systematic emotional manipulation by Jorge, unconvincingly and contradictorily claiming she had been deceived about the legality of actions she consciously took during weeks of careful planning and meticulous execution. Her tears seemed genuine and emotionally authentic, but her explanations contained obvious and glaring inconsistencies that the judge immediately identified through specific technical questions about detailed chronology and administrative procedures that revealed much greater knowledge of legal processes than she claimed to possess. Your Honor, I sincerely admit I made serious mistakes against my dear son, but everything was motivated exclusively by genuine emotional desperation and real fear of losing the man I love more than my own life and well-being, she declared with emotion-choked voice, trying to transform premeditated and well-documented crimes into impulsive decisions, motivated by extraordinary emotional circumstances that supposedly should awaken judicial understanding and mercy, instead of severe legal punishment appropriate to the gravity of committed crimes. Judge Dr. Roberto Silva Mendez, an experienced magistrate of 60 Ausubroides, 2 years with 4 decades of judicial career specializing in criminal law, who had witnessed practically all possible types of cases, demonstrated adequate judicial wisdom to clearly distinguish between legitimate emotional justifications and calculated manipulative attempts to escape legal responsibility through carefully constructed sentimental narratives to awaken sympathy. Mrs. Vera, from your own detailed testimony, it's evident that you practiced imitating your son's signature for several consecutive weeks, meticulously studied specific notarial procedures necessary for property transfer, and executed your criminal plan for 2 consecutive months, demonstrating conscious and systematic premeditation instead of an impulsive decision made under momentary emotional pressure that could generate mitigating circumstances. Jorge tried an even more audacious and cynically calculated strategy, completely denying any active participation in the specific crimes and presenting himself as an innocent and well-intentioned boyfriend who was misinterpreted by a desperate and emotionally unstable woman who acted on her own without his knowledge or approval. The documentary evidence totally contradicted his fanciful and clearly false version of events, including legally intercepted phone recordings, where he specifically instructed Vera on detailed document falsification techniques, and mainly on how to behave during notarial procedures to avoid arousing suspicions from public officials responsible for documentation verification. From the criminal facts meticulously determined during this comprehensive judicial process, it has been unequivocally and irrefutably demonstrated that defendants Vera Silva Santos and Jorge Mendez da Costa consciously participated in an elaborate and systematic criminal scheme resulting in qualified embezzlement, deliberate falsification of official public documents, and consummated fraud against victim Rafael Silva Santos, declared Judge Dr. Roberto Silva Mendez with a grave and deeply solemn voice that echoed imposingly through the completely silent courtroom, where even the breathing of those present seemed suspended in expectation. Vera was sentenced to 3 years and 6 months of imprisonment in a semi-open regime, plus substantial financial fine equivalent to the total value of damages caused, meticulously calculated with monetary correction and legal interest accumulated since the precise date of documented crimes. Jorge received a substantially more severe and legally appropriate sentence, 5 years of imprisonment in an initially closed regime, due to his extensively documented criminal record and clearly established behavioral pattern of systematically exploiting emotionally vulnerable women through falsified romantic relationships, specifically constructed for purposes of obtaining illicit financial advantages that sustained his parasitic lifestyle. After the emotionally charged final hearing, I had a brief but psychologically significant conversation with Vera in the courthouse side corridor, discreetly supervised by judicial officials according to rigorously established security protocols to protect all parties involved. Rafael, I know perfectly well that I disappointed you in a terrible and completely irreversible way. But please, don't completely abandon me forever, because regardless of everything that happened between us, I'm still your biological mother, and that will never change, she said with voice broken by genuine emotion and growing despair, making one last desperate appeal to our traditional family bond that had been fundamentally destroyed by her own criminal choices. Vera, you may be my biological mother forever because that's an unalterable and unquestionable genetic fact, but you stopped being my true family the exact moment you consciously chose to betray me for money, and for a professional criminal who manipulated your feelings, I responded with controlled firmness that surprised even myself with clarity and determination. Real and genuine family consistently protects its most vulnerable members in all circumstances. You did exactly the opposite, consciously transforming me into a victim of your own premeditated crimes. The following 6 months were entirely dedicated to the arduous and psychologically challenging process of completely rebuilding my financial life and mainly my emotional stability after being systematically and brutally betrayed by the person I trusted most in the entire universe. Amanda proved to be my greatest and most consistent source of unconditional emotional support, offering genuine love and balanced psychological perspective that helped me gradually process contradictory feelings about devastating family betrayal, without allowing destructive bitterness to permanently damage my ability to accept and maintain healthy relationships with genuinely trustworthy people who deserved my trust. It's fundamentally important to learn deeply from this traumatic experience, without becoming too bitter or excessively distrustful to accept genuine love from people who really deserve your trust and reciprocity, Amanda regularly advised me with impressive emotional wisdom for someone only 31 years old. Demonstrating psychological maturity, I partially attributed to her professional experience, compassionately caring for people during moments of extreme physical and emotional vulnerability in hospital corridors, where she daily witnessed both the fragility and resilience of human nature. Dr. Henrique continued providing specialized and highly competent legal assistance in the full recovery of financial damages and definitive resolution of all complex bureaucratic issues related to legal documentation of the vehicle that had been illegally transferred. The car was finally returned in excellent mechanical and aesthetic condition, having been recovered through a judicial warrant efficiently executed before the innocent and well-intentioned buyer could make significant modifications or cause additional wear through prolonged use that could have resulted in additional damages impossible to recover. Felipe demonstrated unconditional loyalty and genuine friendship, offering constant practical and emotional support without questioning once my legal decisions or making well-intentioned but counterproductive suggestions about premature family forgiveness that could have compromised my future security. Our friendship deepened dramatically because he conclusively proved willing to genuinely help me, without expecting material rewards or personal advantages, in exchange for his loyalty during moments of extreme crisis when my world seemed to be collapsing. I sought specialized professional psychological assistance with Dr. Carlos Ribeiro, an experienced clinical psychologist specializing in family trauma and toxic relationships, who had been recommended by the Progressive Human Resources Department of the company where I worked. It's fundamental to understand that your mother was simultaneously a victim of systematic psychological manipulation and conscious perpetrator of serious crimes against you. He patiently explained to me during intensive weekly sessions that extended for almost a complete year of therapeutic work. Recognizing this complex duality allows maintaining basic human compassion without excusing or minimizing serious violations of family trust that caused real damage. The birth of my son 2 months after the definitive conclusion of criminal proceedings symbolically represented the definitive beginning of a new existential phase, consciously focused on building family relationships based on genuine love, demonstrated through consistent actions, solid and unquestionable ethical values, and mainly unconditional protection, instead of opportunistic exploitation disguised as traditional family affection that had characterized my experience with Vera. I solemnly promise you will never experience devastating betrayal from people who should unconditionally protect you above any other interest, I whispered emotionally during our first night home after delivery, carefully holding that tiny and absolutely perfect human being while making a personal oath to be a father who consistently places children's well, being above any personal, romantic, or financial interest that could conflict with fundamental and sacred paternal responsibilities. Amanda and I consciously decided to build our nuclear family based on non-negotiable and clearly established principles. Absolute transparency about domestic finances with regular discussions about budget and significant expenses, honest and direct communication about problems before they became insoluble crises, and mainly clear and rigorously maintained boundaries with relatives or friends who demonstrated toxic or manipulative behaviors that could threaten our carefully built family stability. The first crucial lesson I extracted from this traumatic but educational experience is that traditional biological bonds don't automatically guarantee ethical or loyal behavior. People related by blood are equally capable of devastating betrayal when their personal motivations directly conflict with interests of relatives they supposedly should protect above any other selfish consideration. The second equally important lesson is that we have a fundamental moral obligation to protect our own life, dignity, and psychological well-being against any serious external threat, even when those threats come from people who claim to deeply love us, but demonstrate through concrete actions that they see us as available resources for exploitation instead of human beings deserving of respect and unconditional protection. The third transformative lesson is that genuine forgiveness doesn't necessarily require maintaining close relationships with people who have demonstrated capacity and willingness to cause serious damage to our emotional and financial stability. It's perfectly possible to forgive psychologically and spiritually without allowing continued access to our personal lives and mainly without creating opportunities for repetition of destructive behaviors that could affect our nuclear family. Today, I live genuinely happy and emotionally stable, consciously surrounded by chosen family that includes Amanda, Raphael Jr., Felipe, and a carefully selected circle of friends who demonstrated genuine loyalty during my worst personal crisis. I've definitively learned that true family is defined by people who consciously choose to protect and nurture us, not by accidental biological obligations or traditional social expectations about family relationships that ignore clearly destructive and criminal behaviors. Raphael Jr. grows up daily observing positive and consistent models of how emotionally mature adults respond to conflicts through respectful and honest communication, how important decisions are made carefully considering all family members' interests, and mainly how true love manifests through consistent protection instead of opportunistic exploitation, disguised as traditional family affection. During Vera's incarceration period, she attempted to reestablish contact through handwritten letters that gradually evolved from dramatic requests for forgiveness to apparently more genuine expressions of personal remorse and recognition of the gravity of her actions. I responded only once briefly, but respectfully, expressing psychological forgiveness, but clearly establishing that our maternal relationship had been permanently altered by the criminal choices she had consciously made. As Raphael Jr. develops his understanding about complex family relationships, we explain in age, appropriate ways that some people make bad choices that harm those they claim to love. And in those specific situations, it's important to protect our nuclear family by consciously choosing people who demonstrate genuine love through consistent protective actions instead of empty words or repeatedly broken promises. I've professionally specialized during recent years in helping other men who faced similar family betrayals, offering specialized consultation about financial reconstruction and mainly about emotional recovery after crimes committed by close relatives. This professional niche allows me to transform painful personal experience into a practical tool to help other victims of family crimes navigate the legal system and mainly rebuild their lives. Each individual case I help resolve is simultaneously continued personal therapy and concrete opportunity to demonstrate that seeking legal justice against criminal family members isn't betrayal of traditional family loyalty, but necessary and morally justified protection against dangerous people who abuse intimate relationships for criminal purposes. I explain during regular presentations at specialized support groups. During presentations at community organizations and progressive religious groups, I consistently share that complete reconstruction is not only possible, but frequently results in more authentic and emotionally stable existence than before the devastating family betrayal. 6 complete years have passed since that transformative afternoon in the supermarket parking lot where everything began, and when I occasionally pass by the same location during routine shopping, I no longer feel sharp pain or destructive bitterness, just deep gratitude for discovering my real psychological strength, and mainly for having built true family based on authentic love, demonstrated through consistent actions instead of just pretty words or empty promises. The family betrayal that initially seemed capable of permanently destroying my fundamental ability to trust in intimate relationships ended up becoming a transformative catalyst to discover deeper and more authentic forms of love, based on conscious and reciprocal choices, creating infinitely more solid foundations for lasting happiness and genuine emotional stability. My personal journey concretely proves that extreme adversities can transform into valuable opportunities for psychological growth when faced with moral courage and unwavering determination not to allow criminals, even when they're biological relatives, to determine or limit our future potential for happiness and personal fulfillment. True family is consciously chosen every day through concrete actions that demonstrate genuine love, unconditional protection, and authentic commitment to mutual well-being. I regularly teach people facing similar situations and seeking guidance on how to navigate complex and potentially destructive family relationships. If you've been through similar family betrayal, know with absolute certainty that it's not only possible but highly likely to survive and thrive, creating significantly better life based on consciously chosen relationships instead of those imposed by genetic accident. You unconditionally deserve to be happy, safe, and loved by people who demonstrate that love through consistent protective actions instead of manipulative words or repeatedly broken promises. True family isn't the one we're born into by biological chance, but the one we deliberately build through conscious choices based on genuine love, earned mutual respect, and unconditional protection that's never compromised by conflicting personal interests. And this chosen family, for having been earned instead of simply inherited, is infinitely more valuable and emotionally satisfying than any bond based exclusively on genetic accidents or traditional social expectations about unconditional family loyalty. Did you like Raphael's story? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment where you're watching from. There's another story waiting for you on the screen. Click there, and I'll be waiting for you.